Hello, everyone, and welcome on back to Star Wars Loose Cannon. I am your host, Chris Higgins, today, and I am excited to share with you the next episode in our series, Essential Clone Wars. And we are now at the end of Season 1, Episode 19. It's a 3-episode arc, and this episode, or this arc, focuses on Ryloth and how we kick off the rebellion. Exciting developments in the Clone Wars and overall in the Star Wars universe are really centered around Ryloth. And you may not know that if you haven't watched a lot of these shows like Clone Wars and Rebels, but since Clone Wars and Rebels are the cornerstone of the Filoni-verse and new canon of Star Wars, I think this is a really important arc, and I'm excited to dig into it with all of you right now. If you've been listening to recent episodes of the show, you'll know that I'm someone that struggles sometimes with focus and staying on task on certain things in life, and that affects how I prepare for the show and sometimes even how I record it. But luckily, I've been using Magic Mind, so if you're thinking, wow, Chris, you seem a lot sharper in these episodes, you seem a lot more organized with your thoughts, the show seems to really flow pretty awesomely, then you might be crediting that to Magic Mind, and I'm going to tell you guys more about that later in the show. But it's a really nice coffee alternative, or for some, such as myself, coffee complement. And it's a little productivity shot with all kinds of great nutrients and vitamins that are designed to keep you sharp, keep you attentive, all the things that you would be looking for normally with coffee, but honestly, even more so than that. So just want to shout out Magic Mind as our sponsor. But now let's get back to the setup of this arc and the setup of really the first episode. I just want to talk about episode 19. I'm going to go through each episode and summarize each of them. You guys can get the main takeaways, and we can have a little discussion about why this arc matters and why it's important. So Episode 19 is called Storm Over Ryloth. Now, just a little bit of setup. Those evil separatists. They're just doing bad separatist things again. Gosh, dang it, I can't stand them. So Wat Tambor, he's the leader. He's the emir, I suppose, of Ryloth. But he's that robotic guy that you've actually seen in Revenge of the Sith, maybe Attack of the Clones, maybe other episodes, but definitely Revenge of the Sith. And he kind of talks like, we're invading, we're occupying, and then he adjusts this little dial on his chest so that he can speak. So he's definitely a cyborg. One of the more unique, fun characters in terms of villains in Star Wars. At least from the creativity side of things. So him and those bad separatists, gosh dang it, they're at it again. They're blockading the planet of Ryloth. And to be honest with you, I don't know what the strategic value really of this planet is, but they do have this, they have these evil plans, the separatists, to get these planets, occupy them, bring them to their side, enslave them, whatever you want to call it, like making them their own, possessing them, colonizing them, maybe you would even call it something like that. But they don't exactly treat the people very well there, and if you're the public, you don't really like that. You don't really appreciate it. So they want to liberate the planet, and in this first episode, it's all about getting past this blockade so that they can actually get to the planet and liberate the citizens of that planet. So it's up to Ahsoka and Anakin to take on this task of destroying this fleet, beating this fleet that's doing the blockade. And they actually put Ahsoka up to the task of leading the attack Anakin, he is a really awesome mentor. He's a really great master of Ahsoka because he lets her take the reins, and he lets her know what she needs to hear, but he also is able to comfort her as well. So he builds her up, but he's also willing to say the hard things. And even early in the show, in this episode, when he's giving Ahsoka a pep talk, he's saying to her, "Oh, by the way, all these men's lives are in your hands." And she's like, "Great. Well, if I wasn't nervous before, I am now." So that's Anakin for you. He's a straight up dude. So there's this guy named Martuk. He's the captain of the blockade, and he seems like a sharper guy in terms of separatists, commanders, generals, but he recognizes that it's Anakin's capital ship, and so he's already starting to expect some certain things, maybe some trickery, maybe some ambitious attacks, but little does he know it's actually Ahsoka that's really in charge. So what do they have? What is their grand plan here? Well, they just decide that they want to get a small group of piloted ships to go in and kind of soften up. That's the word they use, soften up the separatist fleet. So I assume what that means is they want to get in there and destroy maybe some guns, maybe just beat them up a little bit, and so they can bring in their other capital ships to come in and finish the job. So they've got 3 capital cruisers, I guess you call them, waiting in the wings. And as Ahsoka brings in her squadron, they're facing heavy fire from all sides, but she doesn't want to waver, and she's trying to cut through their defense quickly as possible. And she seems to be doing a good job, but little does she know that Martuk has some tricks up his sleeves. He's going to bring in a couple of his own capital ships out of hyperspace just as their squadron is already deep into the attack. So this is actually a great move by the separatists here, because Ahsoka is so desperate to prove herself as the leader of her own battle for the first time, that she doesn't want to break off the attack, even against direct orders from the Admiral and Anakin as well. And at first they tell her, "Hey, pull back, you're being overwhelmed," and she's losing men. She doesn't at first, but you can tell, she really just doesn't want to fail. But eventually she does, and she eventually is able to retreat, even though she tells her men, "We're not retreating. We're just following orders," because the clones, they don't want to retreat. And that's something you'll notice about the clones, is they're always pretty much go-getters, and they always want to really push the envelope, take it to the enemy. So they actually not so successfully retreat back to the cruisers, who you can see have been pummeled by fire from the separatist cruisers, and they suffer a lot of damage, and they have to pull back. So this causes them to really reevaluate their plan, because they don't have fully healthy cruisers to come back at them, and they're also not going to be able to get a lot of reinforcements. So they really have to think up a plan. And Ahsoka's like talking to Anakin about it, and Anakin's like, "Hey, we're gonna have to send you back out there." But she's like, "Are you kidding me? Like, after what we just went through, this is crazy. There's no way that we can do this without putting our men at risk again." And even though it's coming from a place of fear and anxiety, later on, Anakin reveals that he took that to heart, and he decides that he's just going to send in, one of the cruisers as sort of kind of like a battering ram that only he is going to pilot. So he's going to evacuate the entire cruiser, and he's just going to use that battleship to distract the enemy. He's going to ram it into the commander's ship, hopefully cut the head off the snake, wreak chaos through the ranks, and that'll allow them to easily defeat the enemy. So this plan goes forward exactly as planned, and it is fun to see some strategy involved here that makes for a fun action sequence. So Anakin, he uses the Defender as a battering ram against the main separatist ship. He pretends that he's offering it up as a bargaining chip in their surrender, but actually he's just distracting the commander Martuk, who's really eager to defeat Anakin. So it distracts him for a bit, but he rams it, and it does create chaos for a bit. And then the rest of the Republic battleships are brought in, and Ahsoka's plan actually really comes into play there and really works. They're able to lure the separatist cruisers in really close. They think that they have them by the ropes, but then they pull off this really cool maneuver that they kind of hide their bombers inside one of the ships, and they unleash them because they're blocked from view. They unleash them onto the cruisers from like really close range, and they don't have any ability to get fighters to counter the bombers, and they're able to take out the separatist cruisers in a really creative way. So you did have Ahsoka show some brilliance there in command, and you also have Anakin as doing that as well. So the main thing with this episode is you really got to see Ahsoka overcome insecurity and dealing with the difficulties of leadership in war, also like chain of command. And I think this episode showed us that she can start to overcome these things and start believing in herself. And it also, we're moving the plot forward here into the next episode, which is Innocence of Ryloth. So in this episode is where we see Obi-Wan Kenobi taking main stage as the commander of the ground assault. So in order to really take control of the planet, they need to get into these major cities. They can't really land any of their transports until these cannons are taken out, because they're wreaking havoc on them from a distance. So they get out of range and they of the cities, and they land, and they are deciding to go on foot. So they sent out Obi-Wan decides to send out a few scout teams to see what they're up against. And on the other side, to flip the script, the separatists send out their own scouting through the use of probe droids. And they do see that Kenobi is leading the attack, and they mention how he's known for his deceptive maneuvers. So one of the scout teams, they find juvenile Twi'lek, and they try to help her out, and she becomes a big focus of the episode to show the loss that they've had to deal with. But as they're trying to help her out, the separatists release these big insect-like creatures called Gutkers into the town to hunt down the clones, and they run away, and they with the Twi'lek girl back to their headquarters on the perimeter of the city, and it looks like they're taking a beating from these Gutkers, but luckily Obi-Wan is there, and he uses a mind trick to get them to go beneath a bridge, and he uses the Force to bring down the bridge on top of them and defeats them. So that was probably the coolest action thing that happens in this episode. And they're also able to, the Twi'lek girl is able to lead them into a tunnel to show where the prisoners are, and they're able to free the prisoners. Not only that, they are able to use the cannons against the separatists. They commandeer them and destroy the other cannons. So this episode is a really more of a tier. It's like an emotional episode with the girl. Don't recall if she gets a name in this episode, but she really is, there's a lot of sweet moments in this episode. She really appreciates the efforts of the clones, and she refers to them in her own native language as brothers, in the word Nera. So it's a pretty straightforward episode. Not a ton to take away from it, but I think episode 21, Liberty on Ryloth, is it's a much meatier episode in terms of lore. And in this episode, we do push over to Mace Windu leading the attack. So we finally get to see Mace Windu in the heat of the action and how he handles his business. But before I go into this last episode of the arc, let's talk about Magic Mind. It is, like I said before, it's a productivity shot that I've been using, and honestly, I think a lot of people deal with this, especially if you work at a desk for a lot of the day, or even if you don't. I'm sure that people in all kinds of professional backgrounds, or even non-professional backgrounds, maybe you just like to feel good, maybe you just like nutrition, can use Magic Mind. But I think for me, the main things that I've looked for is the fact that, like, sometimes coffee, it just has, can get old, and it doesn't always last as long as you would like. And I think it's nice to have an alternative, something else to have when you're turning to something for energy and focus. So that was my main reason for going, like, discovering it. But the other reasons, I think, are just like the different ingredients, because I think when you're especially when you're like in a bind, or if you don't feel like taking the time to get all these different ingredients that are like rare, I think it's really nice to just get them in all in one easy drinkable little shot. So some of those ingredients are matcha, ashwagandha, lion's mane mushrooms, cordyceps mushrooms. So they're nootropics, adaptogens. They can help reduce anxiety and stress, which you can actually get from drinking coffee too much. So I like to use this to kind of extend the benefits of my coffee and complement them. But you would never be able to get some of these benefits from coffee alone. So those are some really nice benefits to it. It does have some caffeine in it too. So that is a nice, that is nice, just because I think it's hard to duplicate the buzziness, that really energized feeling that you get from your coffee if you're used to drinking it, without having at least some caffeine. So it does have a little bit of caffeine in it as well. And it's definitely been helping with like mental benefits like recall, creativity, and more productivity. So I think if you guys are interested, if you're someone like me, like if you're a little bit of a health nut and you're looking to get it in ways that are not too expensive and are, I would say, like accessible, this is a really good route for you. And they even have a sleep elixir now, which I've only just begun to try, but it's also a shot that you take right before, about 30 minutes before you go to bed. Helps you fall asleep faster. It gives you overall higher quality sleep, and you wake up feeling actually refreshed. And it goes really well, pairs really well with your Magic Mind, which you have during the day, have your sleep elixir at night. And we have a discount code for you guys for a bundle, which includes the Magic Mind mental performance shot and the sleep performance shot. And so all you have to do is go to the link magicmind.com/SWLCJAN, and you will get 45% off of your first subscription, or 40% off a one-time purchase. And this is only valid for the rest of January. So hurry on and go get your discount. With that, we are on to talking about episode 21, Liberty on Ryloth. So now that the ground assault has been successful, they've been able to land their army onto the city of Labat. They need to go take the last stronghold in the city, which is called Lesu. And this is where Tambor is held up, and he's decided that he's going to bring all of his droid army into the city, where the only real way in is through a bridge. It's like it's a plasma bridge, and it can just be turned on and off with a flick of a switch. So it's pretty hard to get into. Now I'm not exactly sure why they couldn't land, why they couldn't just like land a troop, like land ships onto it. That doesn't really get explained, but the premise of the episode is that they gotta get troops into it, and they need to cross that bridge. So it's heavily fortified. It's not easy to penetrate, but that's the main premise of the episode. They need to get in there and they need to take out their main command, where Want and Tambor is, and also their big tactical droid, which also I learned. I just looked quickly at Wikipedia wanted to verify some information on these episodes. This is the first time that we see tactical droids used in the show. So interesting little tidbit there. So this is where we start to see not only Mace Windu and his style, but we also get to see some of the dynamics at play in Ryloth. So what the Separatists are really doing, what their goals are, how their extra strategy is going to be. And then also we see what the political situation is on Ryloth, which introduces us to a very important leader, which I'll introduce in a second. But just back to our narrative here, Windu, they take like these walkers to really rush the droid tanks that are guarding the city, and they lose a lot of men. They lose like 32 men, but they're able to at least get a foothold outside the city, and that's when they do pull all the droids behind the walls. And now at this point, Windu confers with the council and good old Chancellor Palpatine on what their next move should be, and also the Ryloth's senator. So they confer and they decide that they can't do a siege because that's going to take too long, and they're going to need to do a direct assault. However, they don't think they really have a lot of men. So Chancellor Palpatine suggests, why not just bring in more reinforcements? Admiral New Lauren says, no, we don't have any. And that's always, we don't have any reinforcements. There's no one else to spare. And that's always a plot point in the Clone Wars. There's always it's always a matter of whether or not they will have reinforcements, and they're always tied up for the most part. So, and I mean, I don't think that's too unrealistic. There's always important battles happening everywhere, but they always at least mention, why not send reinforcements? There's no one available. So we can't get more reinforcements. So we don't really have enough men. So what are we going to do? Now, Mace Windu suggests that they use the local freedom fighters as their, use them to help with the invasion. But Chancellor Palpatine says, they're led by that Cham Syndulla guy. Isn't he a bit of a radical? And also the Senator Orn Free Taa, which I think is one of the most Star Warsy names around. He isn't happy about it because he thinks it's going to be a power play from Cham, and he's not for it. So Mace is like, nah, gonna do it anyways. We don't really have a choice. Not really concerned about the political stuff, ramifications. I'm just gonna go ahead and do it. So he decides that's going to be his way is going to be recruiting the freedom fighters into the fold. On the other hand, we have Dooku, and he's telling them, hey, you need to evacuate the city. If you need to evacuate some of your finer things, little valuables that you have, go ahead and do that. But what we're gonna do is we're going to go scorch earth on this place, and we will blame the Republic, and we'll use that as a political victory. Because we'll show them, hey, this is how the Republic does things, man. Like, they're just going around just destroying planets. So that's essentially the plan here, it's a tactical retreat, get out value, get a political victory here, but not much more than that. But it turns out that Tambor, he's a greedy bastard, and he doesn't want to leave without extracting every single piece of valuables that he can throughout the planet, not just on the city, but like within all of the different like suburbs, within the surrounding area, he's like, yeah, I want to get all that stuff before I go. So you have that dynamic going on. And there is one funny scene that I want to mention, is that the droids mention that they are no longer controlled by a central computer, and that makes them independent thinkers. So I thought that was a pretty funny moment, and I also thought it was a nice little lore tidbit. Just the fact that in episode 1, when they wanted to take out the droid army, all they had to do was destroy a central computer, which was on one of the command ships. And that's actually something that Anakin did. He was just having fun, but he ended up destroying that ship. And that took out the whole droid army. They no longer have that problem. Another fun thing is that we do see blurgs in this episode. So blurgs, you may recall, are in the Mandalorian TV show, and it's like those really ugly looking creatures, that two-legged creatures that they can ride. It's essentially like, to me, it's like a big face with legs and tiny little arms, kind of like a dinosaur looking creature. So yeah, go ahead and Google that. We also named all of our Mandalorian episodes Ride the Blurg. So these are cultural icons. So they use these blurgs because they're actually going to be a lot faster than the walkers they were using before. So that is great. So Syndulla, Mace Windu ends up contacting Syndulla, who is important. As I mentioned before, he's an important figure because he is really one of the key figures of the rebellion that will come up later on. And he's also the father of Hera Syndulla, who is one of the main characters in Rebels. So, and also she's in what new show? Ahsoka. Yeah, she's in the Ahsoka TV show. So we really are giving you some background on this Filoniverse with this episode. So they meet up. Mace Windu meets up with Syndulla. He's really skeptical, but he does bring them straight to their hideout, which I thought was interesting, considering the fact that he said he was skeptical that he would help them, and that he'd be worried that they'd be the new overlords that they might have to fight in the future. But nonetheless, he showed them their hideout, and maybe when it comes to Rebels, they're probably used to having to change hideouts locations on a dime. But they clearly had enough trust in a Jedi, for better or worse. So they talk with him, and eventually he's able to get a meeting between Syndulla and Senator Orn Free-Taa. They talk it out, and even though Senator Orn Free-Taa is really concerned that he's going to try to make a power play, they agree that they need to work together in this case. And they do that. The only thing is that they had to agree that there would be no clone occupation once the droids leave, and that Cham would agree to not attempt to seize power. And he said he would do that because he believes in democracy, as much democracy as there is in Star Wars. We don't know. We can't confirm how much democracy there is in Star Wars, but the separatists, they're making their move they're ordered to bring in the last bit of valuables from their looting across the planet, so that Wan Tambor can get out of there with a bunch of goodies. And that's the opportunity that Mace Windu uses. They actually hide on one of these transports, and they're able to get to the other side. Now this is where we do see some fun action. We see like a slow motion bullet time event where Windu, he jumps from, they release the bridge. They turn off the bridge while they're on it, and he somehow is able to save multiple clones. And then he magically, through the Force, he steps on pieces of debris to climb up and get to the other side, so that he can activate the bridge again and bring the clone army and obviously the freedom fighters to attack the city. So at this point, the tactical droid has been ordered like again to get, he's like, all right, you're gonna have to get the F out of there. If Amir Tambor is gonna take too long, then that's too bad for him, because we're about to bomb the city with everyone on it, and hopefully including Mace Windu. So they actually leave without Amir Tambor, and they order the bombing. But luckily, as to the rescue, Ahsoka and Anakin, they take out the bombers at the last second, and the city avoids its peril. And at the end of the episode, we have a Mace Windu and Cham Syndulla victoriously capturing Wat Tambor, and it's all good. All is well. So this arc, just as a whole, it was okay. It probably would be one of, as much as I want to say it's essential, it is maybe not the most entertaining, but it's a decent arc. It's early on in the Clone Wars, and it is cool to see. Honestly, I think the biggest thing to take away from this is just the beginnings of Ryloth, because there are some really cool stories that surround Ryloth. There's even a book about Ryloth, or at least with Ryloth at the center of it, where Darth Vader and the Emperor himself actually go there to bring order and like defeat an insurrection. So it's good to know about this if you're interested in the deeper lore of Star Wars. It's good to know about Ryloth. I am actually really excited. Like I said, this was a decent arc. I'll give it 2.5, 3 out of 5 stars. But I think this next arc, what we're gonna head on to next is the Holocron heist arc in season 2, and that's episodes 1 through 3 of that season. So if you want to get ahead of these episodes, then I would go ahead and watch that, and you can come back to this podcast and see if you agree with my takes or not. And that's where you can reach out to me on Twitter, at Star Wars LC. And I just want to thank you guys again for listening to Star Wars Loose Cannon. I'll be back very soon with our next episode, and until then, may the Force be with you.